Hello, I'm Jonathan Bowman-Perks and welcome to my favourite time of the week. And continuing the Inspiring Leadership series, I'm very lucky to have with me John Strachan, who is the Chairman of INTU, which produced some of the finest city centre shopping experiences in the UK and own 50% of the top 20 destinations. We're going to be talking about board experience and dysfunctionality and good board experiences, good board members, and John's sort of tips and experiences on leadership when it's worked well, when it hasn't. So, John, just tell us a little bit about yourself, the current role, and a bit about INTU, but then your background, really.
Okay.
Just in, say, 30 seconds.
Well, I've been chairman of INTU for a couple of years now, and a huge privilege that is. I'm sure I haven't served on as many boards, and certainly not public company boards, as many others that you're talking to, very distinguished chairman. Most of my experience at board level and as a chairman has been in the private sector, particularly in private professional practice, although in quite large global professional businesses, and otherwise on the boards of trade and professional organisations. So I've come to the public sector, the PLC sector, I guess, quite late on.
Yeah.
INTU is the only FTSE board I serve on. The other main board that I serve on is in the private equity area.
Okay, great. And John, we were talking earlier, we've had a really good discussion, and thank you for that, on when you've been working with colleagues who are executives and then the main board members and the two, how they come together. You've had over the years, and you said I think you've been 30 years on boards, from your days back at Healy and Baker. When you've seen dysfunctionality among boards and where it isn't really working, what do you think was behind why it wasn't working? What was going on among the board members when you found it not really as functional as it should be?
Well, I suppose there were inevitably different circumstances with different factors at work. But I think for me, and you know, I'm not allocating blame. I would have been part of these decisions, you know, cabinet responsibility. But I think probably some of the many of the mistakes I've seen made, particularly in an organisation whose principal assets are its people, its talent, professional talent. Would be about the management, promotion, motivation, and indeed attraction of talent.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes boards make bad decisions in those areas. In my experience, we've made many more good decisions than bad ones.
Yeah.
But I think where a bad decision is made, it's generally because the board or some key decision makers on the board are not close enough, say to the coalface, to the local leaders of those parts of your business, or are not prepared to accept recommendations from outside the board. And I've seen that apply both to you know, really high performance individuals within the business, and on some occasions to those that the business is trying to attract.
Yeah, that was a good point. And we have this picture here of a bit of Africa, of elephants. And it's just as I saw that, I thought, you know, sometimes on boards, I know when I was on a PLC board, there was the elephant in the room that people weren't talking about. You know, there's a problem that everybody knew about, but everybody was avoiding, but it was so enormous. What have you found? Can you think of any story or experience when the elephant in the room needed tackling and people weren't really addressing it? Or maybe you or someone else called it out, you went, that's a good call.
I can't immediately think of you know, the classic elephant in the room that everyone was ignoring. But certainly I've witnessed some key issues being addressed, but not properly dealt with.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a little of the same.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes a board, a business, a company, a partnership simply does not want to address something that is fully aware of and has discussed, but will kick the can down the road a bit
Yeah. And in fact, you were sharing a story earlier when you took on as a chairman in one organisation and how you knew a decision had to be made, but in this case it turned out to be right. You waited with it, because sometimes some leaders come in, bang, they make a decision, they fire a whole load of people,
Yes.
and that's it. What would you sort of share on your experience of that, and whether it was, it worked out in the test of time or not?
I suppose at times there will be differences between what other stakeholders expect of you and what you know in yourself. Bearing all that in mind is the right decision for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes that might look like kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that you don't kick the can down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
You must make those decisions, aware of all the facts,
Yeah.
all the advice, and factor all that in, and then make a decision. Don't put off the decision. The decision might be to make a more significant decision later on,
Yeah.
but make a decision.
And you shared the story of your father with his days in the Royal Artillery as a gunnery instructor, and how he was unforgiving. I think you described him as a...
You weren't an artilleryman, were you?
I wasn't. I was in the signals and then the infantry. But how has perhaps having a father like that shaped the way you are, what you will do and what you won't do? Your sort of value system, really, I'd be intrigued by.
I really can't say that aspect of his character has had a huge influence on me. I have to say that our relationship was an absolute joy.
Yeah.
In fact, he probably gave me too much freedom, I suspect. But I know from others that over the 30-odd years of the mid-40s, right through late 40s, for the next 30 years, he was one of those leaders, managers, who was known, amongst other things, to be a complete Martinet. He insisted on absolute discipline and performance and so on. I don't say that as leaders and managers today, we've lowered our expectations. In fact, I suspect we may have raised them.
Yeah.
I suspect that when he was taking a regiment through Lark Hill before the invasion, what he expected in terms of the performance of those gunners was probably way below what his equivalent expects from the gunners today. I think that everybody's raised their level of performance, and leaders have raised their level of expectation. But I think the other side of that coin is that I think as leaders or managers, you have to understand that the people in your teams have changed generationally. What they hope for, what they expect, how they want to behave themselves, and how they want the business and their leaders to behave.
Yeah. And you talked about that indeed in INTU, having to be very focused on what the people having a shopping experience wanted.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. At the consumer level, that's really what drives our business and the change that we're having to deal with.
And that thing. And the other thing we then turned on to, and we're almost at the end of our time together, but the other thing was about what, in your experience, has made high-performing board members, and you particularly talked about the respect they were held in and the making good decisions. Anything else you want to sort of say on what
I think
makes
that was
high
particularly directed at the at professional businesses.
Yeah.
In the old days, professional partnerships, not many of those left. But I think it helped. I don't say it was an absolute essential, but I think it helped if the people in leadership positions, people managing the business, and maybe there's a difference there actually. Quite possibly you could have very effective managers, but I think in terms of leadership, it helps hugely if that individual has the respect of everybody around him or her.
Yeah.
And part of that might be because they're high performance individuals in their own right. They've clearly performed at a very high level in their particular business or sector.